Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bob Savage. We're doing the Contemporary Topics 1 book, you know. But before we start today's session, first of all, what can I say? I just hope, well, we miss you as teachers, as staff at the Scudo University. We miss you a lot as our students, and we hope that you are all well and keep safe from this awful virus. So that's the first thing I want to say. Secondly, well, if we tap the board, it's listening, you know, Paddington listening. Then we tap again. That's me. You also know, I guess. And then, well, I don't know what that is, but yes. Today's subject is history. There'll be a lot of dates and numbers and names. But before we go to the video, we will watch the video and listen to the lecture. But first, we have to check the vocabulary. So, we'll start with this. The title is Expedition, which means adventure and explore, like Christopher Columbus did all those years ago, to Antarctica, which is, of course, not the North Pole, it's the South Pole. So, let's go through the vocabulary very quickly. Oh yeah, here we are. And oops. Number 1. In 1913, explorer Vigjalmur Stephenson led a trip on the ship the Kirkuk to the North Pole. He had a crew, there's the key word there, of 13 sailors, 10 scientists, and 8 other people. First choice is people who work on a ship, we're talking about crew, or people who travel by ship. Choose one now, and the answer is people who work on a ship. That's crew. Number 2. The Karluk sailed north toward the Arctic Circle surrounding the North Pole. So sailed, vocabulary A, travel overland, or B, travel over water while pushed by wind. And you'll choose which one that is, and the answer is B, sailing on the sea over water. Moving on to 3. Whoops. Yeah. Soon the ship became stuck. There's the key word there, stuck in the ice and did not move for 3 weeks. The ice floated slowly north, taking the ship with us. But we're going for the word stuck here. Yeah, like me, I got stuck then. A, unable to stop or couldn't stop, or B, unable to move or couldn't move. And of course, stuck means B. The answer is B. So, 4. Up to 4. Stephenson did not care about his crew or treat them with respect. There's the word there, key word is respect. Instead of staying with them, with the crew, he took 5 men and left the ship. He never returned to get the crew back. Respect is A. Concern, worry and thoughtfulness, or B, anger and rudeness. And the answer must be A, of course. This is respect, concern, worry and thoughtfulness. On to 5. 5. However, ship's officer Bob Bartlett, namesake, took care of the crew, even though it wasn't his job. This showed leadership. So leadership means being a leader or following a leader. And the answer, you will probably guess, obviously, it's A. On to 6. So leader, leadership. 6. Bartlett, or Bob Bartlett, of course, ordered the crew off the ship and onto the ice. And everyone, the crew, of course, did what he said. So, ordered. Told someone to do something, or B, being asked someone to do something. Answer is order coming from A. 7. Halfway house. The ship was finally crushed. Oh, by the way, we're on page 93. You can read and follow this. I'll do both. And circle the right answers, of course. Page 93, Unit 10. The ship was finally crushed by the ice, breaking the ship into many pieces. A would be make a big hole in something, or B, pressed so hard that something breaks. Crushed. A or B? Answer is B. 8. The ship sank under the water. A, turned on one side, or B, went below the water. Well, I'll give you a clue. Sink, sank, sunk. It's an irregular verb there. The answer is B, went under the water. Now we're going to 9. The crew survived on the ice by catching birds and other animals to eat. Well, I don't know what, seals or fish, I don't know. Anyway, survived is the key word. A, continued to live, or B, continued to travel. Answer is A, of course. 10. Bartlett tried to keep the... this one's a bit tricky. Bartlett tried to keep the crew's morale up, but they were depressed and fearful, or afraid. Now, morale, the pronunciation, be careful with this E at the end. A belief about right and wrong, or B, level of positive feelings. Now be careful with this. The answer is B, level of positive feelings. Morale means a good and positive feeling about something. Keep up your morale. A is moral. Without the E, moral would be about right and wrong. But this is about positiveness, so it's B. 11. With the goal or target of getting help, Bartlett took a small team of men and left. This is very easy. A group of people who dislike each other, or B, a group of people who work together. You guessed it, of course, it's easy. B, team. A good team, teamwork. Let's go to 12. Yeah, okay. Meanwhile, another ship rescued the crew in September 1914. It was a long time ago. A, saved, or B, left the crew. Which one is it? Rescue, saved, must be A, of course. 13, 2 left. Oops. Yeah, okay. During the 8 months they lived on the ice, 8 months on the ice, 11 people died. However, the crew credited Bartlett with trying to save them. A, believed he made a mistake, or B, believed he did something good. To credit somebody with something, answer is B. Yes, to believe that someone did something good. And the last one, before we watch the video, 14. Today, over 106 years ago, Bartlett is remembered, Bob Bartlett, Bartlett is remembered as a hero for being loyal to the crew, while Stephenson is remembered for leaving his men to die on the ice. So, loyal is the key word here. We are looking for A, always supporting other people, supporting or helping other people, or B, thinking only of oneself or yourself. Answer, loyal, is A, being loyal to someone else. Now what I want you to do is I want you to go with your books to page 96, and there is a think about it. This is about Shackleton on his trip with the ship, the Endurance. Look at the map. There's a map of Antarctica, this time the South Pole. There are true-false questions, and there are date and time questions on page 96, and true and false on page 97. Because this is a rather different kind of lecture, you can do while listening. But always it's a good idea to take notes. There is some space there, or if you've got your notebooks, you can take notes as well, because there will be times, dates and times. So just while I get a DJ to help me put the video on, you have a look at those questions and have a look at those pages 96 and 97. You can do this while listening and while watching the video. And here it is. Okay, I hope the volume is sufficient for you. So, why don't we start?
When we think of the great explorers, we typically remember them for achieving their goals, right? But today I'm going to tell you the story of Sir Ernest Shackleton and his trip to Antarctica. Now his goal was to lead the first group to cross Antarctica on foot. However, he never reached this goal. In fact, everything went terribly wrong. So why do we remember Shackleton? Because of the great leadership he showed during the trip. Shackleton left England in 1914 on the ship the Endurance. He had a crew of 28 men, including the ship's officers and sailors, and some scientists who came along to do research. In January 1915, they entered the Antarctic Circle. However, it was colder than normal, and the ocean was full of ice. And the Endurance soon became stuck. Shackleton and his crew realized they'd have to wait 10 months until November, which is springtime in the Antarctic Circle, for the ice to melt. So, there they lived, on the ship, stuck in the ice and waiting for spring. Now, Shackleton, who was called the boss by his men, kept their morale up by keeping them busy. Now, in those days, ship's officers and scientists didn't usually interact with sailors. The officers and scientists usually got better food and lived in better conditions. But Shackleton needed everyone to work as a team and not as individuals. So, everyone shared the jobs on the ship. The officers and scientists labored right beside the sailors, cleaning the floors, and the sailors helped with the science experiments. Everyone ate the same food together at the same table. And consequently, the men all became friends and learned to work together. Over the long winter, as the ship floated with the ice began to crush the ship. The crew could hear the awful sound of the wood bending and breaking as the ice closed in. And so in October of 1915, Shackleton ordered everyone to move off the ship and onto the ice. For nearly a month, they lived on the ice, next to the dying ship, watching it get slowly crushed. Then on November 21st, 1915, with Shackleton's cry of, "She's going, boys!" the men watched, horrified, as the Endurance came apart and sank into the water. But even when everything seemed hopeless, Shackleton didn't give up. He promised his men that if they worked hard and stayed together, they would get home. Now at this point, Shackleton's leadership style was very important to the survival of the crew. Because of the way he treated the men, treating each man with respect, the crew became extremely loyal. They believed in him. If Shackleton believed they would get home, well, the men believed it too. With the arrival of summer in March of 1916, the ice they had been living on began to melt. At this point, Shackleton and his men knew that they had to get to land. Now, they had floated close enough to see Elephant Island, a small rocky island about 100 miles off in the distance. So in April, Shackleton and the crew got into 3 small boats they had saved from the ship. And after 7 days of rough water and freezing temperatures, they finally made it to Elephant Island. It had been 467 days, more than a year since the men had stood on land. However, they still had absolutely no hope of rescue. No one knew where they were. At this point, Shackleton made his riskiest decision yet. He decided to take one of their small boats and sail back to a whaling station on South Georgia, an island about 800 miles away, and get help. He left Elephant Island with 5 men, promising to return and rescue the others. After 17 days of sailing through some of the roughest waters in the world, Shackleton and the 5 men finally made it to South Georgia, amazingly. However, they still had to walk for 36 hours over ice-covered mountains to reach the whaling station, so the job wasn't done. And when they walked inside, as the story goes, the station manager took one look at these guys and said, "Who are you?" It had been so long that everyone thought Shackleton and his crew were dead. Over the next 4 months, Shackleton tried 3 times to rescue the men back on Elephant Island. But the sea was still full of ice, and the ships couldn't make it. Meanwhile, the men on Elephant Island were surviving, but had started to lose hope. They began to think that Shackleton had never made it to South Georgia, and that they'd be stuck in Antarctica forever. Then on August 30th, 1916, nearly 2 years after their trip had begun, the men saw a ship approaching in the distance. They ran to the beach, waving and shouting. It was Shackleton, coming to rescue them. Shackleton, from the ship, counted the men on shore and cried with happiness when he saw that they had all survived. He'd kept his promise to them. For this, Shackleton is credited as one of the great heroes of the time. Not for reaching his original goal, but for leading his men through some of the worst conditions in the world and keeping his promise to them to bring them home alive.
Okay. Now, before I show you the answers, let's have a look. On page 96, well, that's okay. We can live with that for the time being. I'll press later. First, number 1, the Endurance, name of the ship, left England. Date or year. 2, the Endurance entered the Arctic Circle. There's a map, what the Arctic Circle looks like, on page 97, of course, and became stuck in the ice. Date, time, year. And next, number 3, months until spring begins. The month of spring, how many months? 4, Shackleton ordered the crew off the ship, get off the ship. Date, time. And then number 5, the Endurance, the ship sank. We know what that means now. And number 6, the ice began to melt. Month, year. 7, the crew travelled in small boats to Elephant Island. You can see it on the map again on page 97. 8, 17, sorry, how many, excuse me, days Shackleton and 5 men sailed to the whaling station on South Georgia Island. Well, I gave you a clue there. Number 9, how many hours? Hours, the HRS stands for hours. Shackleton and his men walked across South Georgia Island. And number 10, the date and the year Shackleton rescued all of his men from Elephant Island. Well, we haven't got that much time left before we do the true and false, so, no, not that one, no, no. We did that. Next one? No. Yes, that's the one I was looking for. There we are. Number 1, 1914. 2, January 1915. 10 months for October 1915, 5 November the 21st, 1915, March 1916, April 1916, 17, the one I mentioned, I slipped. 36 hours they walked across the island, and then they were rescued finally on August the 30th, 1916. Please go to page, the next page, yeah, which is 97. 1, true or false? You put T for true or F for false. I'll correct them afterwards if they are false. 1, Shackleton's goal was to sail around Antarctica. 2, the Endurance's crew, I beg your pardon, included ship's officers, sailors and scientists. Shackleton, number 3, Shackleton had crew members work together to get work done quickly. 4, in October 1915, the crew moved onto the ice because the ship was full. 5, the crew reached Elephant Island. It was the first time in more than a year that they had stood on land instead of on ice. 6, Shackleton and 5 men travelled 80 miles by boat to South Georgia. You can look at the map, maybe you can calculate that if you're clever. 7, the South Georgia station manager thought Shackleton and his crew were dead. And 8, Shackleton rescued his crew on Elephant Island right away. So, TF, 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 TF. Looking at the clock. Oh, yes. By magic, without touching anything, these are your answers. Now, if you calculate them, there are 10 on page 96, 8 on page 97. 18 out of 18 is 100%, like I got, as usual. 17 correct, if you quickly calculate them, 17 is 94%. 16 correct, 89%. 15 correct, 83%. 14, 78%. 13, 72%. Now it gets tricky. 12 correct, 67%. And the last passing grade is 11 correct, 61%. And that's the barrage, or the breakage score. So, that's my lecture for today. A bit of history. So, take care. Please be careful. And we really hope to see you again as soon as we possibly can. And thanks for listening, and bye-bye.